Go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining another DevTest Community webcast. Today we're going to cover scaling out virtual service environments and simulators. Our presenter today is Ulrich Vogt. He is a Senior Principal Engineering Services Architect for the Service Virtualization product. If you have any questions as we're going through today's session, you can always enter them into the Q&A box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. If you put a question in there, we'll get to answer it as quickly as possible, and if we're not able to answer it during the session, we'll also have a Q&A session at the end where we cover all of those questions. We'll also have the option to ask verbal questions at the end of the session today, so if you have any questions that you feel are best reserved to ask verbally over the phone, you can hold your questions until the end. I'm now going to hand the call over to Ulrich. Go ahead, Ulrich.
Thank you, Melanie. Can you see my screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Perfect. Thank you very much. My name is Ulrich Vogt. I'm a member of the Continuous Delivery Business Unit and part, as Melanie said, of the Engineering Services team, also called the SWAT team. Today's DevTest Community webcast is about scaling out DevTest services, in particular virtual service environments and simulators. Scaling out means that we want to add and start multiple DevTest services of the same type, connected to the same single DevTest registry in order to distribute service load, separate user access, and avoid interference of users and tests. For the sake of simplicity, in this webcast we shall cover scaling out virtual service environments only. To do the same for simulators follows an equivalent process and almost the same steps. Now that we have mentioned two DevTest components already in the webcast title, let us quickly review the available DevTest components for the new DevTest users in the audience. The Enterprise Dashboard service is the central DevTest component that takes care of the DevTest license information and monitors the product usage with the help of the registry services. You can have multiple DevTest registries reporting to a single Enterprise Dashboard. The registry component is the hub of a DevTest deployment. A registry creates something like a domain where the other DevTest components, apart from the Enterprise Dashboard, of course, register their services. The portal component is the server for the DevTest web UI. The DevTest workstation is a rich client for DevTest to manage DevTest assets and to work with DevTest. Since DevTest 8.0, we are in the process to migrate workstation features to the DevTest web UI. The broker manages and coordinates the DevTest Java agents. The coordinator manages tasks that are executed on the simulators. A virtual service environment, or VSE, hosts virtual services that mimic real-life services. Simulators and VSEs are the workhorses of DevTest. Those components do the main work in DevTest production environments. On today's DevTest webcast, we will present one DevTest use case where the scaling of VSEs matters. We then go over installation, configuration, and launch of DevTest and VSE to point out the important settings and options. We will then walk through the configuration of ACL and DevTest in order to confine user access to dedicated DevTest services. Before we demonstrate the same in a live test environment. At the end, we will have some time left to answer questions from the audience, but you can always post your questions, Melanie said, to the chat of this webcast. Before going into technical details, I do want to first give kudos to valued colleagues who contributed to the content of this webcast. Marcy already published tech tips in our DevTest community on how to configure multiple VSEs and simulators on a single machine. Marcy has joined our panel during the webcast and will respond to your questions. Kausim and I created a set of best practice architecture guides for DevTest deployments in Microsoft Azure. While the guides cover DevTest deployments in Microsoft's public cloud, the use cases discussed in those guides are independent of the deployment target, but apply to other on-premise, private cloud, or hybrid environments as well. The mentioned use case number 4 especially covers the use case of teams sharing a single DevTest server environment for different purposes. This is the use case that might require additional VSEs or simulators. Use case number 4 of the best practice guides describes a scenario where several users share a single but distributed DevTest server environment comprising of a single registry server, including portal, broker, and coordinator, but multiple remote servers running VSEs and simulators. The registry service connects to a remote enterprise dashboard for license information. VSEs and simulators connect to the remote registry. The DevTest user at the bottom of the slide have different tasks. User 1 may enhance a complex virtual service, so he is a kind of a virtual service developer. User 2 develops a client application testing against the current version of the virtual service. And user 3 performs load tests of the current client application against the virtual service. Given the different tasks, each user wants to have his or her own VSE environment running continuously, or a VSE that can be taken down, and a VSE that is under development and may change its behavior. The load testing user requires a specific virtual service environment that's configured for performance tests. Those need specific configuration settings. Focus of this webcast is the DevTest server in the right-hand network. And we particularly look at the setup of the multiple VSE servers here. The previous slide suggested that we run a single VSE on a single system. In cloud environments, we can request virtual systems that are tailored exactly to the needs of a single VSE. However, DevTest does not require this one-to-one relationship of one VSE per system. DevTest supports the launch of multiple VSEs on a single host system if the system has sufficient resources to serve the needs of all the hosted virtual service environments. In our test environment, we will demonstrate both the configuration of two VSEs on a single system and on different systems. We will have two systems, A and B, a Windows and a Linux box. On each box, we will launch two VSE services. On one system, each VSE requires a unique port number to listen for requests to deploy and to manage virtual services. We will use the same port number on both systems. Eventually, we will create teams of user groups in DevTest and confine their access to one of the VSEs only. However, everything starts with the installation of DevTest on those servers. Let's take a look at the installer options first. Given that we want to install a VSE on a separate system that is remote to the registry service, it is fair to assume that the registry service already exists, and therefore the enterprise dashboard service also is installed already. So we do not require a license file for the installation, but select the option to install DevTest against an existing enterprise dashboard server, which we have to know, of course. According to our use case, we want to dedicate a system to run two VSEs only, but no other DevTest services. Using our current DevTest installer, we cannot select the individual DevTest components to install, but we only have the choice of installing a sole workstation or a fully fledged DevTest server, including a DevTest workstation. So in our case, we have to opt for a fully fledged DevTest server installation. On a Windows box, we do not select the option to install the DevTest services as Windows services. If selecting this option, we would end up with DevTest services configured as Windows services that we do not need. We shall create the Windows services that we require for the virtual service environment manually. Once the DevTest installation is completed, we have a default DevTest configuration available. The default configuration assumes that the DevTest Registry service is running on the local system. However, given our use case, the registry service is supposed to be remote. So the first step is to tell the local DevTest services where to find the registry service. We do so by adding this configuration parameter lisa.registry.url to the local properties file, which is located in the Lisa home directory. This parameter points to the host name where the registry service is located. It specifies the port number where the registry service lists on, and the name of the registry service that the registry service is configured with. The port number 2010 and the registry name with a capital R at the beginning are the default values. For the next configuration steps, we need to be aware that both DevTest UIs, the portal and the workstation, do not show where a VSE is located. They identify their VSEs and simulators by their names only. So by default, each VSE has the name VSE only. Taking this into account, we need to make sure that we assign names to our VSE services that are unique across all the VSEs in a single registry domain, meaning all the VSEs connecting to the same registry service have a distinct name. Otherwise, the DevTest behavior is not predictable. If VSE names are not unique, we cannot tell which VSE virtual service is deployed to, for instance. Okay. Before looking at the other configuration parameters, let us first show how simple it is to create a second virtual service environment service on a DevTest server system. The DevTest binaries are located in the bin folder of Lisa Home. There you will find two VSE-related binaries, the virtual service environment and the virtual service environment service binary. You can use the first one to launch a VSE from command line. However, you must use the second one if you want to run a VSE as a service on both Windows and Linux. Continuing this webcast, we will work with the second one, the VSE service binary. To create a second VSE service, we just copy the existing virtual service environment service binary to a different name. And now we have two VSE service binaries. We can pass Java JVM parameters to Java applications in VM options file. In order to do that for our VSE service binaries, we copy the existing one for the installed binary we copy this one and give it the name, the prefix name of the second binary. This is necessary because Java requires the VM options file to have the same name as the binary. In each of the VM options file for the VSE service binaries, we can now define the configuration settings. We specify the VSE name that is unique across all the VSEs connecting to the registry service. In the first parameter, we specify the VSE port number that is unused by any other service on the local system. For the VSE name, I recommend to add the local host name for uniqueness in the registry and a counter if you install more than one VSE on a single system. My preferred naming convention for VSEs is to start with the VSE prefix to indicate that this is a VSE service we are configuring, then to add the host name as a second parameter, and eventually to add a counter for the number of VSEs running on the local system. Now that we have configured the VSE service parameters, we may want to configure the VSE services as Windows services in order to have them started automatically at system startup. The SC command supports management of Windows services on Windows boxes, of course. Yeah. With this command, you can create, delete, start, or stop Windows services. When creating the Windows service, you have to distinguish between the service name in the green boxes and the display name in the red box. Those can be different, of course. The service name is what you want to use in SC commands to refer to a particular Windows service. The display name red is what you see in the Windows Service Management widget. On Linux system, you have similar capabilities as you have on Windows boxes. You start and stop VSE services, and you can add them to the Linux init procedure to start them at system start. The different Linux distributions use different approaches. On Red Hat 7, a new concept was introduced based on so-called systemd, which replaces the former checkconfig-based concept. Now that we have configured our VSE systems, we need to configure DevTest ACL to confine the different users and teams to their respective VSEs. So let us review our use case again. We want to have team 1 to connect, not connect, but to use the first VSE on system A, and team 2 to use the second one. Team 3 and Team 4 will get separate access to the two VSEs on System B, respectively. We use the DevTest portal to configure access to these DevTest resources. After logging into the DevTest portal, we have to navigate to the access control panes. In order to be able to modify access to DevTest resources, we need to have related administrative permissions. Those are the user and role administration and the resource administration. By default, the user role system administration has these privileges out of the box, in addition to the super user, of course, that we are going to use in our demo. In order to create the user access in DevTest ACL, we first create a resource group for each team and assign resources to the resource group, including the VSE, the last one on the list on the right, and simulator and coordinator services. Next, we create team roles and assign permission to the roles. You see all effective user types. These are the permissions that we have assigned to this team, to this role. We assign we assign all privileges to work with those resources, except for the administrative permissions to modify user roles and resources. Next, next we assign the resource group team 2 that we have created before to this role. Eventually, we add an existing user to the role to have access to the assigned resources with the assigned permissions. Now, okay, we are done with creating a user to access the resources, particularly to access the VSE service. Okay, so that's the theoretical part, and we now want to apply this to a real DevTest environment. In our demo, we have a registry server. We have a registry server on Windows 7 system that also hosts the enterprise dashboard. We already have a local VSE that's installed by default, but we don't want to use that one. The two remote systems are located on a Windows 2012 server and on a Red Hat 7.2 system. The Windows 7 box is my laptop, while the other two systems are virtual, running in VMware on a VMware workstation. Okay, let's now switch over to, sorry, once again. In the demo, we will first show the current status, and then we are going to add the Windows Virtual Service environments. After that, we add the Linux VSEs and use the ACL configuration to create a team that can connect to one of the new VSEs. Now let's switch over to the current desktop. Here we go. Let me first go to the home page. This is the landing page in DevTest Portal when you log into the DevTest Portal. We can check the available virtual service environment services by in the monitor pane, on the left-hand pane in the monitor section, where we have the available virtual service environments listed. Please click refresh, expand the node, and see that we have a single VSE environment available. This is the default name, and this one is running on the local system. We do want to disable this service because we don't want to use this VSE, so we go there and remove and stop this service. Okay, let's go back to refresh. So there. Sorry, always happens. Okay. So this, now this service is gone, and we can move on to add the Windows VSE service to this environment. For this purpose, we move to the virtual machine. And the first thing, if you remember where we started, is to configure the local DevTest environment on this remote machine to connect to the remote registry. We do that by adding this specific configuration parameter to the local properties file. So this information is not present in the local properties template file, the _ local properties, which you get out of the box by default. You have to create your local properties file according to the product documentation and add this parameter explicitly to the content of the file. The next thing would be to copy the existing virtual service and the existing VSE service binary to a second binary. That's what we've done here. You see, this is the binary that you get out of the box. Here you see the copy, and here you see the VM options files matching up the binary names. The content of those VM options files, we discussed those, specify the VSE name, following the naming convention, and we assigned the port numbers, which are not used on this virtual system. Additionally, we name the log file of this virtual service and give it the name according to the VSE name. This is done for the first VSE service and for the second one accordingly. Different name, different port number, different log file. The next step, we now want to add the virtual service to the Windows service list. It's currently not present there, so I've created two scripts to help with that, where we use the sc command using the Windows service name and the display name for the Windows service. We also have to specify the path to the binary, of course, and we want that this Windows service is started automatically upon system startup. The same applies to the second VSE. Now let's call those patch files. The same for the second one, and verify whether those services have been created. There we are. We now start those VSE services from the Windows service display from here. We could do the same from command line using the sc command. Now that we've started those VSE services, we can check whether they show up at the DevTest portal. Let's do a refresh here. Looks like we are having trouble with the portal service. So I apologize. I think I'll restart the portal service. And we will continue adding the Linux services, the Linux VSE services to the DevTest environment. Okay, for this purpose, we go over to our Red Hat system, which is running on VMware Workstation. We log in. And verify that the Red Hat system is connected to the network. Currently, it's not connected, so we want to do that here. We open a terminal on our Red Hat system. We go to the installer. We go to the installer directory. And check whether we have the available binaries, available. Here we go. We do have the two VSE binaries, VSE service binaries. I have a copy of that one, and we have the related VM options files to both. So now let's start those services. And check whether they are started correctly. So I'm cautious, give them another shot. Yeah, so they keep running. Now let's go to the DevTest portal and check whether the portal service is available again. Looks like it is. Let's check the monitor page to refresh here and see how many virtual VSE environments we have. So the first two ones are the ones started from the Windows box, from the Windows 2012 server. And the second one are the ones we have started on our Linux system. So the configuration of those VSEs, of the VSEs on those boxes appears to be correct. What's left to do is to configure the access, the individual access of the teams to those VSEs. For this purpose, we select the settings pane, go to the access control node, and check the available resources. Here we should see all the VSEs that are registered in our registry service to show up. And here we can see that these 4 VSEs are available with the corresponding port number, corresponding host systems, and their current status, whether they are connected or disconnected. In the next step, we define the resource groups, meaning we define the set of resources that we want to assign to a particular role or to users, for users to work with. So we create a new resource group and assign the resources we want this group to have. We select the coordinator, we select the simulator, and we select the fourth Red Hat system to use for this team. So this one is here. Oh, once again, this, and this one, and move them to the right table. Again, let's verify. We give the new resource group a name, call it Team 4, and click the Save button. Now the team shows up. Let me check. Yeah. So we have defined the resource group. Now we define the roles of that users of this group should have to work with the resources. So for this purpose, we define a new role, call them, according to the other names, Team 4 testers. Tester. And give them all the privileges except for the administrative ones that we want to use separately. The next step, we define the resource group that this role should be able to use, and we select Team 4 to use. We select the resources that are part of Team 4 for this role to work with. Now we should not forget to press the Save button to save this information. Check, we got the new role here, and information is saved. Eventually, we want to create a new user to be with this role, and we add this user, call it, of course, tester4, set password, and confirm the password, and assign the role of Team 4 tester to that user. Save this information. Now let's check. This user has the role of a Team 4 tester. We can navigate to the information of this role. We see that this role got assigned the resource group of Team 4, and Team 4 contains the coordinator, simulator, and the VSE that we assigned beforehand. So the final step of this demo is to validate that the ACL configuration is correct. For that purpose, I log out of DevTest portal and try to log in as tester4. Okay, that works. And as with the administrator, checking for the availability of all the VSE services, we can now check which VSE services are available for tester4. And that's the VSE that we configured. So this concludes the demo. And we go back to our presentation. And we are ready for the summary. What we did in the demo and in the presentation, that we created multiple VSEs for load distribution and different requirements, as we laid out in the initial use case about that we have users to do the application testing, users that create virtual services or add new data to the virtual services, and other users may run performance tests. We did so by adding virtual service environments on different systems and on the same system. And we connected those VSEs to a single remote registry. We proposed a VSE naming convention for better identification of the VSEs in both the DevTest UIs. And we configured the access to specific VSE services for the segregation of teams. Okay, that's it. Any questions right now?
Again, just a reminder, if you have any questions, you can enter them into the Q&A box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Also, if you'd like to ask a verbal question at this time, you can click #6 on your telephone keypad to unmute yourself. We do have a question from Ravi in the Q&A box. I see here we are doing the horizontal scaling. Do we have any best practices for vertical scaling, considering a proportional configuration of infrastructure? Oh, and Marcy put in an answer. She says, it depends on the number of services you need deployed, but Ulrich could probably give a better answer. So, okay, so we still need an answer on that one.
Yeah, the horizontal scaling, but it's proportional configuration of infrastructure. I'm not sure I understand the question of what vertical scaling means. The number of VSE, well, yeah, I think if I understand the question correctly, this might depend on the number of resources you assign to a VSE. So it depends. It depends on the size of the system and whether you want to run a single or multiple VSEs on those specific system. Does that answer your question?
We'll wait for a response. We have another question in saying number of VSEs that we can run is dependent on the number of licenses, correct?
No, that's not correct. The license is applied refers to the number of users of the DevTest resources. So you can have as many VSEs as you think are reasonable in your environment. We count the usage, not the number of services.
And Ravi said that your answer did help. We have another question in from Rohit. Do we have any best practices on segregating port numbers for multiple VSEs on the same box?
No, there is no best practice on that, because the port numbers are not only reserved for VSE, but can be used or are to be used by other services on the local system. So it definitely depends on the kind of service you're running on your system, and yeah. So, well, you have to look for ranges of port numbers that you can assign to the VSEs.
Okay.
You have to look for the range of free port numbers to assign to your VSE.
Any other questions? We'll pause for just another minute to let any questions come in. We have another question in. Is there any limitation on the number of concurrent transactions / users supported in a single VSE? Does it have any link with license?
I think you have to have a specific license if you want to run a VSE for performance tests. Other than that, there is a limitation. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's about 10 transactions per VSM. I don't think that's on a per user basis. Marcy, do you have any information? Yeah, to add to the single part, there's a second part of the question.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, there used to be right now to change the capacity for load testing. We have a property, and I can find that property where you can set it so you don't have that limitation. A lot of it's on the honor system, you know, because all that information is being tracked in the enterprise dashboard. But we do have a property that is in our documentation, so it's kind of open now. You'll get a licensing error it'll say that it can't run it because the number of transactions is exceeded, but once you set this property, that message goes away. So I can find that property. I actually have put a communities post out on for it, and I'll try to put that in the chat. I'll find it real quick.
Yeah, we can also include that that community post you wrote in the webcast recap we post later today, Marcy.
Great.
Yeah, I just checked on this property. This is mentioned in the product documentation in the list of properties for the local.properties file. So if you go to product documentation, you will find it there. Yeah, to the second part of the question, does this have any link with license? As Marcy mentioned, you need a specific license, the performance test license, if you want to run a VSE in performance mode. Well,
not a separate license. You don't need a different license. You just need to set this property. Right now, everything is still included in the one DevTest like XML. It's a property what enables that, but you don't need a different license. You can use that same license. Just set the property.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, we have another question in from Mona Lisa. Do we have any limits on how many VS we can run on a VSE?
Do we have a, no, there isn't. I think there is no limit. But the virtual services can be of different sizes. So there is you can configure the amount of memory you want to assign to a VSE by using the VM options file and set the according Java parameter. I don't have this at the top of my head, but they can assign, let's say, up 2, 4, 6 gigabyte of memory to this VSE, and according to that, you can load as many virtual services as the VSE can host. But there are different parameters that affect the usage of the memory. For instance, the number of current threads and the number of requests that are received, or that are number of transactions that are handled by the virtual service. So you have to find out how many virtual services are reasonable to put into a single VSE.
Okay, we have another question in. Is it possible to provide access to only specific services alone on a VSE?
No, that's not possible right now. We specify access to DevTest resources, not to the resources, not to virtual services in detail.
And another question in. If we have, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's not, we specify the DevTest resources, meaning VSE, not to virtual services. So we do not specify access to virtual services. Is it, Melanie? This is different. So we specify access to DevTest resources. Yeah, okay, good.
That would be a feature request.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you'd like to enter an idea in the community, we can certainly monitor that. Okay, another question in from Mona Lisa. If we have any limits, can we increase the system capacity to use single VSE for multiple virtual service?
Yes, well, you can always increase the heap size for the virtual machine, for the Java virtual machine, if you have enough memory on your system. So yeah, I think there is a. I'm not sure whether we have an example in our product documentation, but we can definitely provide information on the community how to do that, how to increase the memory on a single VSE.
Okay, last call for questions. If you have any questions, you can enter them into the Q&A box. Okay, if there are no more questions, we're going to wrap up for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I put a poll out on the quality of today's webcast topic. If you could please let us know what you thought of today's topic. We really value your feedback when choosing topics for future webcasts. If you have any questions that you think of later on this topic, you can always enter them into the community. We're constantly monitoring the community space to answer any questions that come in. Otherwise, we have another webcast coming up on November 17th, and that webcast is on ESB and service virtualization. If you're interested in that or any of our future community webcasts, you can head right to the DevTest Community and RSVP on any of those events. Thank you so much, Ulrich, for the presentation today. It was really great. And thank you, everyone, so much for joining, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you very much.